The movie opens in New York City, where John Wick and his pit bull have sought safety with the Bowery King. BK enters and asks John if he's prepared to pursue the high table as he's beating a board till his knuckles bleed. John only replies, "Yeah." In Morocco, John rides a horse and pursues guys working for the elder. After killing those men, John goes to the elder and demands his ring, but the elder informs John that the ring is no longer there. The elder is subsequently put to death by John before he leaves. The Harbinger, who was sent out by the High Table, summons Winston and Sharon to meet the Marquis de Graymont back in New York. They now know that the elder was put to death, and the Marquis punishes Winston for not killing John. The Marquis condemns and blows up the New York Continental as a result. Winston is declared to be out of the church, and to make matters worse, the Marquis shoots Sharon in the chest. Winston says it should have been him and remains at his friend's side until he passes away. Kane, a blind assassin, is in Paris, watching his daughter Mia play the violin in the park. The Marquis instructs Kane to pursue John. Although Kane claims to be retired, the Marquis threatens Mia's life if Kane defies the High Table's orders. Shimazu Koji, whose daughter Akira works as the concierge at the Osaka Continental, is an old friend of John's. Although Akira doesn't trust John being there, Koji meets with John on the roof and agrees to provide him with refuge in secret. The Marquis right-hand man Chitty soon shows there with his killing squad to try lure John away. Koji's own men arrive and engage the High Table killers by shooting arrows in the dark. John pulls his revolver and begins to do what he does best as soon as the hitmen reach the roof. While most of the High Table hitmen are defeated by Koji's guards, Kane shows up and starts his own corpse count. He sets up traps to enable him hear where his targets are moving before using his sword and gun to murder the men. Akira enters the battle in the meanwhile and puts some of Chitty's men to death, although she is wounded by a gunshot, and assists her and Koji in escaping. John fights additional soldiers, killing a few of them with a pair of nunchucks. Kane discovers him, and even though they still consider one another to be friends, he decides to pursue John despite his reluctance to do so for Mia's sake. Before John is able to escape, John and Kane engage into a brief altercation. A tracker named Mr. Nobody and his German Shepherd are there during the gunfights, and he manages to kill some of the assailants pursuing John. He wants the contract on John's head as well, but he is currently assisting John since he feels the current hit, $20 million, is insufficient. Koji and Akira stumble into Kane as they are leaving. He and Koji had been friends for a long time, but Koji won't let Kane pursue John, so the two fight with swords. When it seems like Koji will be allowed to leave, he continues to struggle until Kane strikes him in the head. Akira hugs her father's body as he passes away and tries to slay Kane with his sword, but he warns her not to do so should she meet the same fate as her father and promises to see her again. Akira goes to John at the train station and accuses him of being responsible for her father's passing. He is warned by her to murder Kane or else. Winston meets Bowery King because they both understand that the fact that they are still close to John makes them targets. The Harbinger confronts the Marquis about the needless carnage at the Osaka Continental, but the Marquis insists that it is essential to murder John Wick in addition to dismantling the notion that he is an untouchable and unkillable person. Mr. Nobody then pays a visit to the Marquis and wants a $23 million contract to assassinate John. In response, the Marquis impales his hand and forces him to decide between taking the knife out and pulling his hand out to examine his goals. The Marquis grants Mr. Nobody's request as he jerks his hand away, slashing his fingers. At Karen's grave, John meets with Winston and expresses his sorrow for his friend's passing. Though it is widely thought that High Table duel were myths, Winston wants to get revenge on the Marquis and informs John that in order to be released from the High Table, he must challenge the Marquis to a duel. Only John's family can help him succeed, but the Ruska Roma tore his connection with them and cut off assistance. John decides to look for them as there is no other option. When John arrives to the Ruska Roma in Berlin, the priest greets him with a shotgun blast before tying him up and placing a noose around his neck. He is greeted by Katia, his adopted sister, who is upset with him since he killed the elder, which caused the Marquis to order the assassination of Piotr, who would have supported John in the battle. When John offers to help Katia make amends, she instructs him to pursue Killa, a member of the German high table who is responsible for her father's murder. After being located, John visits Killa's nightclub where Kane and Mr. Nobody are also present. Killa plays cards with the three, cheating while doing so, and then orders his soldiers to pursue the three assassins. While John pursues Killa throughout the club among unaware clubgoers, Kane and Nobody manage to hold their own against the thugs, along with Nobody's dog. Killa utilizes his power and weight against John while John battles him. Killa attempts to stop John by pushing him off a balcony, but it is ineffective. John is pursued by Killa's soldiers, who are fatally wounded. Killa is ultimately cornered by John, who then throws him down a flight of stairs, killing him as he hits the ground head first. As confirmation of Killa's demise, John grabs one of his gold teeth and shows it to Katia. Katia responds favorably and assists John as he goes through the procedure to receive the family crest and support for the duel. The official John challenge document is brought by Winston to the Marquis. Winston explains that even when the Marquis tries to back out, he is still obligated to follow the high table's customs. Additionally, Winston asks that if John wins, he would restore his management to the Continental, remove the condemnation, and end his excommunication. Winston is nonetheless reminded by the Marquis that as he will be John's second, he too will pass away if John does. The Harbinger rule over them as John arrives to sit down and talk about the terms of the fight with the Marquis. In dawn, they will meet in Paris-Sacré-Cœur and engage in a pistol duel. It will constitute a forfeiture and grounds for execution if any of them fails to appear before the deadline. Kane will be the Marquis' second, and if he can murder John, he will release both him and his daughter. John visits a church and sits down to pay respect to Helen. He is greeted there by Kane, who tells him about Mia and what he stands to lose. Later, when John meets Winston and Bowery King, the latter gives him a new rifle and a bulletproof outfit. The Harbinger warns the Marquis of what would transpire if John were to assassinate him at the high table. The Marquis sends Chitty and his thugs after John to make sure he doesn't get to the Sacré-Cœur in time. Additionally, a radio DJ informs any other assassins who are listening that John has a reward on his head for anybody who can murder him before dawn. Numerous assassins pursue John as he makes his way to the Sacré-Cœur. He engages gunmen in street combat, even swerving into traffic near the Arc de Triomphe to kill the bad guys or allow them to be run over by vehicles. His whereabouts are tracked by the high table, which prompts further assassins to seek him out. John walks into a room filled with criminals and starts shooting explosive bullets at them. While helping to kill some of the assassins, Nobody phones the Marquis and requests a larger reward. In the end, the Marquis accepts a $40 million deal, driving more frantic and tragic hitmen away. When John eventually reaches the Sacré-Cœur steps, he kills a number of further assailants before Chitty appears and throws him all the way back down the steps. In order to assist John get to the top and murder Chitty's men, Kane appears. Nobody shows up and starts attacking Chitty for throwing his dog into the street, although the dog is fine. Chitty is hauled to the ground with John's assistance, the dog bites him in the balls, and Nobody shoots him in the head. The dog also urinates on Chitty's face for good measure. Just as the sun rises, John arrives. He and Kane take up their pistols and begin a traditional duel. Both succeed in striking each other twice. Kane shoots John in the stomach during the third round, but John doesn't respond. The Marquis then gives him the go-ahead to pull off the ultimate kill so that he may be the one to kill of John Wick. Before Winston calls him an arrogant jerk and points out that John didn't fire his final bullet, he pulls his gun and points it at John. Before John blows his brains out, the Marquis discovers it's too late. After that, the Harbinger states that John and Kane are no longer subject to the High Table's obligations. John momentarily remembers Helen as he walks down the stairs and says her name. John Wick dies a free man. Donald and Bowery. As per John's wish, the king buried John next to Helen with a gravestone that inscribed, "Loving husband." In response to BK's question about whether John is in heaven or hell, Winston says, "Who knows?" BK keeps watching over John's dog as the two depart. After the credits, Kane seeks for Mia to reunite with her. Akira begins to get closer to him so she can get her revenge.